There are moments in a life when the world seems to conspire to reveal something hidden, not with thunder, nor with spectacle, but with a quiet disturbance that unsettles the comfortable places of the soul. It often begins with something that appears foolish on the surface, some rumor whispered at the margins of faith and fear, or some scandal that spreads its wings across the public imagination like a dark, beckoning storm. And yet, if one listens closely, beneath the noise and accusation, beneath the sensationalism and spectacle, there is often a deeper truth, a truth not about the scandal itself, but about the human heart that gives such scandals their power. For the human heart is a strange engine. It trembles at shadows, it chases illusions, it worships trinkets, and all the while it hungers for something vast enough to steady its trembling. Every age has its superstitions, its shortcuts to salvation, its whispered promises that meaning can be bought like merchandise. And every generation, in its own way, learns again that the most dangerous forms of deception are not the ones that live in the world around us, but the ones that quietly take residence within us, those small internal betrayals we justify in the name of comfort, or convenience, or the illusion of control. You may have heard the phrase, "Apply oil to these 7 body points, and the witchcraft will break instantly." A sentence woven from fear and hope in equal measure, promising liberation with the stroke of a hand, transformation through ritual, wealth through magic, deliverance without discipline, and perhaps, like many, you feel a mixture of amusement and disturbance at the idea. How could anyone believe such a thing? How could such a notion take root in the modern mind? But the wiser question, the one that pierces deeper, is not why others believe such things, but why we harbor the desire for them. For beneath every superstition lies a universal longing, the yearning for power without responsibility, for abundance without examination, for transformation without the painful excavation of the soul. For the heart that seeks to grow must first be willing to unveil its own machinery. We do not chase superstition because we are ignorant. We chase it because we are impatient. We do not fall into misguided rituals because we lack intelligence. We fall because we fear the weight of self-examination. It is not the oil that tempts us. It is the promise of an easy cure, an instant solution, a way to leap over the valley of inner work and land directly upon the mountain of abundance. But the truth, steady and incorruptible, remains untouched by our shortcuts. The landscape of the soul cannot be healed by external rituals, nor can the poverty of the spirit be filled by formulas, nor can wealth of any kind, material or moral, be obtained without the transformation of the inner life. For wealth, if it is to be lasting, must grow from a foundation deeper than mere desire, richer than mere ambition, and stronger than mere superstition. The gold that endures is not mined from mountains or minted by fortune. It is forged in the furnace of a renewed mind. And so when I speak of wealth, I do not speak merely of currency or possessions, though those may follow in due time. I speak of something far more radiant, the wealth that comes from clarity of purpose, the wealth that comes from integrity unbroken, the wealth that comes from a conscience of peace, the wealth that grows in the heart of a person who has learned that meaning, the kind that sustains, that strengthens, that liberates, must be cultivated, not conjured. And yet the temptation to conjure remains, whispering to us in every era, there must be a faster way, there must be a secret, there must be a formula. We dress this temptation in new language, but its roots are ancient. The truth is that the soul's poverty is never cured by external rituals, just as the soul's richness is never diminished by external circumstances. A wealthy heart can be found in a humble home, and a destitute soul may sit upon a throne. The abundance that truly transforms does not enter through the skin, but awakens within the spirit. The oil that truly breaks the power of darkness is not poured from a bottle. It is born through the slow, often painful restoration of one's inner world. It comes when a person refuses to be deceived by illusions, when they rise above their own impulses, when they finally confront the truth, that the greatest enemy they face is not a curse cast by another, but the curse cast by their own fear, their own selfishness, their own drift away from meaning. And when you understand this, when you allow it to take root not merely as an idea but as a revelation, you begin to see the world differently. You begin to see that the scandals that grip the public imagination are not isolated events but mirrors held up to the human spirit. You see that every sensational promise, whether it is wealth through witchcraft or power through deception, whispers the same lie. That transformation can be borrowed rather than built, purchased rather than practiced, received instantly rather than earned faithfully. But there is no ritual to replace the labor of inner growth, no magic to substitute for moral courage, no shortcut to the kind of wealth that ennobles rather than corrupts. Yet this realization is not a burden, it is a liberation. For the moment you release your grip on shortcuts, you free your hands to build something real. The moment you stop chasing illusions, you find yourself standing upon solid ground. And from that ground, the path toward true abundance begins not with superstition, not with spectacle, but with the steady unveiling of the self, with the quiet confrontation of who you are, with the unwavering commitment to who you must become. And it is here, standing at the crossroads of illusion and integrity, that the journey toward inner transformation truly begins, not with the loud declarations we often make when our emotions are stirred, but with the quiet decisions forged in the chambers of the will. There is a kind of decision that does not shout, does not grandstand, does not seek applause. It simply steps forward within you, like a seed awakening to its purpose, and from that first step, something subtle shifts. You begin to realize that life has always been less about what happens to you, and more about what is awakened within you. The world offers you its noise, its temptations, its spectacles, its false altars, promising blessings without responsibility, but the soul knows better. It knows that nothing external can save a person who refuses to confront the truth within, just as nothing external can destroy a person whose inner life is rooted in meaning, discipline, and a kind of moral strength that no scandal and no superstition can touch. For the deepest kind of wealth is not an outcome, but a posture, a way of standing in the world with a heart that is no longer seduced by illusions nor intimidated by shadows. And perhaps the greatest illusion of all is the belief that something outside you, some ritual, some object, some person, can rearrange the architecture of your spirit. The architecture of your spirit can only be rebuilt from within, brick by patient brick, choice by deliberate choice, until the very structure of your inner world becomes strong enough to carry the weight of abundance without collapsing under it. Because abundance, if received with an unprepared heart, becomes a burden rather than a blessing. It magnifies what is broken, it inflames what is corrupt, it exposes what is fragile. But if abundance comes to a soul that is grounded, disciplined, and refined through truth, then it becomes not a curse, but a crown, a responsibility you are capable of bearing with humility, wisdom, and grace. And this is why so many chase shortcuts, not because they lack desire, but because they fear the cost. True transformation requires sacrifice not of things, but of illusions. It requires you to surrender the idea that someone else will save you, that a ritual will heal you, that success can be taken like a pill to relieve the symptoms of a deeper decay. It demands that you release the comforting lie that you can remain who you are and still receive the life you claim to desire. For the life you desire cannot be given to the person you currently are. It is reserved for the person you must become. And so long as you cling to the habits that weaken you, the fears that diminish you, the self-deceptions that blind you, you shut the door on the very abundance that quietly stands waiting on the other side. But transformation is possible. It has always been possible. It begins with the simplest, most powerful revelation that the greatest battles of your life will never be fought in the public arena, nor in the opinions of others, nor in the circumstances that seem to threaten you. They will be fought within the unseen corridors of your heart. It is there, in the private chambers of thought and desire, that the true victories or defeats of a life are determined. And when you understand this, you begin to see why the world fills itself with rituals, ceremonies, and spectacles meant to distract us from doing the one thing that actually breaks the power of darkness, examining ourselves with honesty. For honesty is the most dangerous force to anything that thrives on illusion. It does what no oil, no charm, no incantation can do. It strips the shadows of their power by flooding them with truth. And truth, when it touches a human soul, does not simply inform, it transforms. It does not merely guide, it awakens. It does not simply correct, it liberates. And liberation, once it begins within you, becomes impossible to conceal. It begins subtly, a thought shifted, a temptation resisted, a small but significant act of courage that you once would have denied yourself. And then, like dawn breaking over a restless sea, the light grows. You begin to see the places where you traded your strength for convenience, where you surrendered your integrity for approval, where you allowed fear to shrink the boundaries of your life. And though this realization may sting, it is a sacred sting, the kind that signals the beginning of healing. For healing does not begin with comfort, it begins with clarity. And clarity is often unsettling because it requires you to face the truth that some of the wounds you carry were not inflicted by others, but by your own neglect. You starved your own growth. You silenced your own potential. You allowed yourself to remain small because smallness felt safe. It has been waiting beneath the layers of fear, waiting beneath the disguises of pride, waiting beneath the quiet despair that whispers that nothing can change. Strength does not enter you from the outside. It awakens from within, like a lion stirring from a long slumber. And when it awakens, you begin to see why the illusions that once captivated you now seem so hollow. You begin to see that the rituals which once promised escape now appear as chains disguised as freedom, and you recognize that the oil you needed to apply was never to the body, it was to the heart, the mind, the conscience, the places within you where fear had hardened into disbelief, and where self-deception had taken the place of purpose. And once this kind of wealth begins to grow, it changes everything you touch, not because the world suddenly becomes softer toward you, but because you yourself become stronger, clearer, more anchored than you have ever been. The circumstances that once unsettled you lose their power. The voices that once intimidated you fall to a whisper. The temptations that once seduced you reveal themselves as hollow invitations to return to a life you have already outgrown. And when you stand upon this inner solidity, you begin to understand a truth that many never discover. The world outside you obeys the condition of the world within you. A frightened soul creates a frightened life. A dishonest soul creates a tangled life. But a disciplined and illuminated soul begins to create a life marked by integrity, abundance, and quiet authority. And authority, true authority, is never loud. It does not demand attention. It commands it simply by existing. It is the kind of presence that enters a room without performance and yet changes the atmosphere because its strength is not borrowed from circumstances but born from conviction. It is the kind of authority that does not need to manipulate, does not need to charm, does not need to deceive, for it carries within itself a clarity that makes deception unnecessary. And here is where many stumble. They confuse charisma with authority, noise with truth, spectacle with substance. They mistake the theatrics of power for the nature of power. But theatrics fade, authority endures, and authority is what you gain when you stop outsourcing your transformation to rituals and begin to cultivate it through discipline. Discipline is the furnace in which integrity is forged. It is the process of teaching your desires to bow to your purpose, of training your impulses to follow your values, of strengthening your character until it becomes unbendable by the pressures that would have crushed you in another season. And discipline, once cultivated, becomes the guardian of your destiny. It preserves what truth awakens, protects what clarity reveals, and nourishes the seeds of abundance that begin to grow once illusions are uprooted. Yet, how few embrace discipline willingly. How many prefer the fantasy of instant transformation, the expectation that a single act, a single object, a single ritual might undo years of neglect. But discipline is the slow miracle, the quiet revolution, the inner uprising against the parts of you that prefer ease over excellence. And though it may move slowly, it moves faithfully, building a strength that does not crumble when pressure comes. For what is the use of sudden wealth if the heart that receives it is unprepared to handle its weight? What is the use of influence if the character holding it is too fragile to remain upright? It is better to grow into abundance gradually than to collapse under it suddenly. And as you grow, something else begins to change, not just your habits, but your vision. You begin to see with a sharper lens, discerning the subtle difference between what merely glitters and what truly endures. You recognize the emptiness in pursuits that once fascinated you. You feel the stirring of a deeper ambition, the kind that cannot be satisfied by applause, approval, or accumulation. You long for a life that is not simply prosperous but purposeful, not simply comfortable but consecrated to something higher, truer, more enduring. For purpose is the compass of the soul, and without it, wealth becomes a prison rather than a privilege. A purposeless person drifts even when they have everything. A purposeful person rises even when they have little. And purpose, once awakened, demands honesty. It requires you to confront the motives behind your ambitions, the shadows behind your desires, the hidden corners of your soul, where fear has shaped your choices more than conviction has. And it is here, within this confrontation, that one of life's greatest revelations often emerges. That the witchcraft you feared was never an external force at all, but the quiet erosion of your own integrity. Nothing enslaves the human spirit more subtly than the compromises we justify in the dark. Nothing casts a deeper shadow over the path of abundance than the small betrayals of the conscience we allow in the name of convenience. These betrayals accumulate like dust settling on a mirror, gradually dimming the reflection of who we truly are until we become strangers to ourselves. And when you no longer recognize your own reflection, you become vulnerable to any ritual, any superstition, any lie that promises a return to clarity without requiring a return to truth. But truth invites you back not with condemnation, but with conviction. It whispers that you do not need magic to be whole, nor rituals to be restored. What you need is courage. The courage to confront your own heart. The courage to uproot the beliefs that have kept you small. The courage to forgive yourself for the seasons you wasted, the opportunities you neglected, the strength you doubted. And most of all, the courage to rise not through shortcuts, not through illusions, but through the steady rebuilding of the self. And as this rebuilding continues, as the inner architecture of your life is redesigned according to truth rather than fear, gratitude begins to bloom, not the shallow gratitude that counts blessings like trinkets, but the deep gratitude that recognizes transformation as the greatest gift a human being can receive. This gratitude grounds you, steadies you, clarifies you. It reminds you that abundance is not measured by what enters your hands, but by what awakens in your heart. And from gratitude, something even more beautiful begins to emerge. Moral strength. The kind of strength that is not loud, not performative, not self-congratulatory, but quiet, firm, immovable. A strength that allows you to stand upright even when others bow to convenience. To walk in truth even when deception offers an easier path. To pursue purpose even when pleasure calls you away. And this strength becomes the foundation upon which the rest of your life is built. For a life built upon moral strength cannot be shaken, not by disappointment, not by betrayal, not by failure, not by the storms that sweep through every human story. It stands because it is anchored in truth, and truth, once embraced, becomes the one force the shadows cannot corrupt. And it is here, in this unshakable strength, that the path for true abundance begins to widen into something vast, something luminous, something worthy of the life you were meant to live. For abundance is not merely a state of possession, but a state of being. It is the condition of a soul that has learned to walk without bending under fear, to give without calculating loss, to stand without trembling before the uncertainties that once governed its decision. And when you begin to inhabit this state, even the smallest moments become infused with a sense of sacred significance. The air feels different. Time feels different. Your very breath feels like participation in a story larger than your own survival. For abundance is not the accumulation of wealth. It is the discovery that wealth is only one branch on the tree of a well-ordered life. Beneath that branch lies the root system of character, conviction, gratitude, humility, and purpose, without which the branch cannot bear fruit. And yet so many chase the fruit without tending the root, forgetting that anything gained without integrity must be defended without peace. But anything gained through truth sustains itself without fear. The soul knows this instinctively, even when the mind resists it. That is why shortcuts seduce us. They appeal to the restless part of us that forgets that real success is not a moment, but a becoming. And becoming requires patience. Not the passive patience of waiting, but the active patience of building, of shaping your inner life with the same care a sculptor uses to carve stone. It means refusing the temptation to rush what requires time. It means understanding that anything worthy of permanence must grow slowly, layer by layer, until its roots are deep enough to withstand the changing seasons. And perhaps this is why so many are drawn to the rituals of superstition. They offer the illusion of speed, the promise of instant reward, the seduction of bypassing the long road in favor of the hidden door. But the hidden door always leads back to the same room, the place where you must confront who you are without the disguises you have used to distract yourself. It is no wonder, then, that rituals flourish in times of spiritual poverty. When people lose the courage to examine themselves, they seek procedures to replace transformation. They seek formulas to replace conviction. They seek oils to replace honesty. And the tragedy is not that these rituals exist. It is that they keep people from discovering the power that has been within them all along. A person who believes they are cursed is already living in submission to their fear. A person who believes they need magic to be whole has already surrendered their authority. A person who believes they require external deliverance has forgotten their internal strength. But when truth interrupts this narrative, everything changes. It touches the parts of you that have long been asleep, waking your courage, igniting your purpose, stirring your dignity until it rises from the dust of neglect like a long-forgotten king reclaiming a throne. And with this awakening comes clarity. Clarity that wealth is not immoral, but the pursuit of wealth without integrity is. Clarity that success is not corrupting, but the heart that chases it blindly is vulnerable to corruption. Clarity that abundance is not dangerous, but the soul unprepared for abundance will always mishandle it. And clarity that the real witchcraft worth fearing is not the superstition of rituals, but the far more subtle enchantment of greed. Greed that blinds, greed that erodes, greed that devours the moral muscle of a person until they can no longer distinguish between blessing and temptation. For greed does not appear as a monster, but as a whisper promising satisfaction without responsibility, pleasure without consequence, gain without gratitude. It is not loud, it is seductive, it does not threaten, it persuades, and if left unchallenged, it becomes the architect of your downfall, guiding you gently into the hollow life of someone who has everything but is nothing. But when the soul awakens, when truth takes hold, greed loses its power, for greed cannot coexist with gratitude, cannot compete with purpose, cannot survive in the presence of a heart that has tasted the strength of integrity. Integrity, true integrity, is not merely about honesty with others. It is about alignment with yourself. It is the harmony between who you claim to be and who you actually are when no one watches. It is the quiet victory of choosing what is right, even when nothing external rewards you for it. And the soul that lives in integrity becomes untouchable, not because life spares it from difficulty, but because difficulty cannot unravel it. A person of integrity may be pressed but not broken, tested but not shaken, challenged but not corrupted, for integrity builds a fortress within you, a place where fear cannot enter and shadows cannot hide. And once you dwell in such strength, you no longer chase wealth out of desperation, but out of responsibility. You no longer pursue success for validation, but for stewardship. You no longer seek abundance as proof of your worth, but as a tool for your purpose. And when abundance arrives, whether in wealth, influence, opportunity, or wisdom, it finds you ready. Not because of rituals performed upon the body, but because of the oil of truth poured upon the soul. And this oil, unlike the oil sold in fear, does not promise instant deliverance. It promises enduring transformation. It does not break curses, it breaks illusions. It does not remove obstacles, it strengthens you to overcome them. And this is why the soul that has awakened, the soul that has rebuilt itself, not through superstition but through truth, becomes impossible to enslave. You cannot manipulate a person who knows their worth. You cannot deceive a person who examines their motives. You cannot bribe a person who understands purpose. You cannot intimidate a person who walks in integrity. Such a person becomes a light in a world addicted to shortcuts, a steady presence in a culture obsessed with spectacle, a beacon for those who have forgotten that the greatest miracle is not a ritual performed upon the body, but a transformation unfolding within the soul.